Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod. I am Lieutenant Commander Clyde Haynes, sitting in the big chair while our illustrious captain is taking a little R&R. And with me, as always,
I'm Paul Satachet, your chief morale officer, ready to abandon ship. All hands abandon ship.
oh, well, I'm so glad that we get to do another pod this week. It's going to be great. This week, we are going to do a little deep dive into who is Paul Satachet.
Oh wow, that is going to be brief.
Oh, it's gonna be a great time, Paul. It's gonna be a great time. This is gonna be podcast gold here.
Okay, but
So we're gonna
podcast Latinum, everyone. Gold press Latinum. This is gonna be, this is what's gonna be.
that's what this is. If you're in the chat, we're glad that you could be with us. Paul, why don't you tell people how to check us out, where they can check us out, and what specials that they can do to hang out with us.
Oh well, yeah, great. That is gonna be tough because I don't have that part pulled up. See what happens when we don't have our captain here, guys.
I
Uh
mean,
First of all, I think it's clear that everyone should follow our podcast, right?
yes,
That can be done at what can be done at Clyde?
it can be done at Star Trek discoverypod.co.
Uh huh.
Yes.
And if you like us and you want us to help support us, uh, definitely not by the strength of this episode because our captain isn't here, but maybe consider joining our Patreon for just $2 an episode at Star Trek Pod slash. Did I do it wrong? Oh no, it's Patreon. Oh my God, Clyde, help! I'm
All
drowning.
right.
I don't have my paper in front of me.
You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You can help us out at patreon.co/Star Trek Pod. That's where if you want to hang out with the Star Trek, yeah, come hang out with us. And for just $2 an
$2.
episode, you can have access to our private members only jackets. Now, our private members only Slack, where we chop it up and talk about all things Trek. Yes, like Takako,
Hey,
who's in the
Taco.
chat. She's one of our podcasts, like our Patreon, like members. She holds us down, kind of on
And
the Slack channels.
and since we're doing a deep dive on Paul, if you have any questions you might have for me, feel free to type in the chat. Capital H, capital P for a hot Paul,
There you go.
and we'll answer that.
Yes. Yeah. So just yeah, you can subscribe, rate us, review on Apple and Spotify. Hang out at StarTrekPod.co is where you can find all of our information, our links, and our everything.
Cool beans.
Yeah, it's gonna be a rough one. Hopefully Myrriah's not listening. Otherwise, she's like,
But when she is, boy, are we gonna get a dressing
"Oh
down?
man, you have no idea." If you're trying to figure out where we are next week on the pod, Paul and I are gonna be in the brig. Myrriah's gonna do the show solo because we are a whole 3 minutes in and we have fumbled everything.
Yeah, warp core breach, everyone. Warp core breach.
Yes, I started out as lieutenant commander. Next week I'm gonna be
That's right.
ensign. All right, so yeah, let's jump in. But before we do that, let's just I don't know. It does feel like it's time for a I mean, we could call it hot freaks, but it's definitely hot Paul this week. So Paul, like it's fantastic. We've been doing the pod since episode 1. If you've been with us, you know that we've had the crew has changed a little bit here and there. And so this is I feel like Paul, you were able to jump in and really, I don't know, like really take a hold of this new season, this new experience with us.
Yes.
But I don't know that we ever really got a chance to
Yeah.
jump in
No.
and understand your history with Trek. So I can't wait to ask you some questions.
Oh, that's awesome. Also, like I think I jumped in. Was it 4th season of Discovery? Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
or was it Strange New Worlds? I don't know, but it seemed like how long we've been doing this? Maybe have we been doing it for 2 years already? 3 years maybe?
Two, three, I think.
Okay, wow. Like
Maybe
yeah,
two.
time flies.
It's yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody this week, and they were asking me about Trek, and we were having a discussion about uh, kind of prestige TV and peak TV, and there was this whole notion of like, well, maybe they have a story, they tell the story, and it ends. And I was like, yeah, when it comes to Star Trek, I don't really get that feeling. It really feels like we needed at least another season, probably
Sure, sure,
two.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And so, to your point, I love Trek. It's been going on for a while. They run together, and I love it. So you jumped in, and I was like, "Hey, Paul, feels like you've been here since day one."
It's a new season
So
with Paul.
new
Special,
season.
I'm the 7 of 9 edition. Just a-
Oh, speaking of which, I have some trivia for you as we kind of get into who you are.
uh,
But Paul, why don't you start with just tell us a little bit about yourself, right? And I'd love to start with kind of understanding how you got into Trek. Like, what was your first introduction into Star Trek?
okay, so I was born in old ago, and my dad used to watch Star Trek, and now he only watched three things. He watched MASH, Star Trek, and golf. And I was not a very big golf person, and I did watch MASH, but the thing that was very interesting to me was Star Trek. Partly because people flying around the universe, getting into adventures, and and it seemed very fun, and pew pew lasers here and there, pew pew aliens, it just seemed like a great way to watch some TV and hang out with my dad a little bit. Like we didn't have a lot of overlap as far as what we liked, so this was one of those overlaps. So there you go. That's how I started. Uh, Question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So, this was the original series, I'm assuming.
This is yes. This is the original series. Yes.
Okay. What kind of impact or how did it that in watching that with your dad, how did that influence you?
Yeah. See, I think a lot of people, I think, find they find like a TV show that uh that really speaks to them. And so in the 70s, like what I found was uh there wasn't a lot of Asian dudes on TV. And like you might think that like oh I relate to Sulu, and on some hands I do, but the person I relate most to was Spock because
Hmm.
he was kind of an outsider in this world of humans, and that as much as he was adored and and integrated into the crew, he was always apart, and I felt like that really spoke to my immigrant experience, in America. Like, I'm a kid, so like, I don't know
Mhm.
much. I just feel like he was the person I gravitated to. He seemed to be the level-headed person all the time, and and I feel in general, aside from my craziness, I'm pretty level-headed. So like and it's pretty funny because this is a similar experience to with my wife. She watched Star Trek with her dad, and she imprinted like the person I I want to be with is going to be a little bit like Spock, and and I am fairly like logical and cold hearted, and so like and 23 years later we're still married.
That is fantastic, man. Yeah, I mean, I too. It's interesting how often I hear parents
Hmm.
exposing like their kids to Star Trek, and it just clicks.
Hmm.
Right? I'm still trying to do that with my kids. We're going to
It,
talk about Prodigy in a couple
yeah,
weeks.
yeah,
That
yeah,
didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, but I'm not
yeah.
going to
Like
give up.
it's a very interesting thing. Like I had this conversation yesterday with someone, and it was very grim and pessimistic, partly because of presidential debates, partly because like the upcoming debates or the debates now,
Hmm.
and partly because he's about 20 years younger than me, and um, he just seemed to have a much more pessimistic view of the world. And one of the things I came to realize was like, oh, I bet he doesn't watch Star Trek. Not
Hmm.
not because like you watch Star Trek and you're not pessimistic. I don't know, but I think like Star Trek has a fairly optimistic view of the world and the future. Like it you know by its start, like in the original series, basically we solved it. It starts off like we solved it, and here we are in adventures. And I think there's an aspect about Star Trek that really spoke to me as a kid, that like, oh, the troubles that we've had, like we solved. And so like the woes that we're in now, like like even in my mind, it goes, they are overcomable. You know and so I think Star Trek tends to attract optimistic people.
Hmm.
I think so. That's just
No, I
this is
agree.
like, yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why the show, like I watch Star Trek Next Generation. I watched the animated series. Like, I've watched all the Star Treks, and
Okay.
and for all of it, like it all really is very like possible future forward. You know, like there are great shows that are darker. Like I love Battlestar Galactica, but Battlestar Galactica can be a bummer.
I mean, it does have a certain
Uh huh.
I mean, it's the thing that's different is Battlestar Galactica is more it's end of the world, right?
Uh huh. Sure.
So it's definitely much more apocalyptic, and
Hmm.
but it's also like it's much more of a western in the terms of
Totally.
we we've got to find a new place to live, and we've got
Sure.
to settle, and
Hmm.
there's a lack of resources, and we've got to overcome these
Hmm.
problems. Where Star Trek is, to your point, I mean, I love the way you said that, is we solved it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hunger, we solved. Greed, we solved. Right? Racism, we solved. Sexism, we solved. Like we solved it, and
Yeah.
now we're going out and explore.
Yeah. I mean, like, I wish more people could relate to that. Like, and I guess my question for you is, do you feel like your kids are optimistic in that way?
Not yet. My one is my
Okay.
son. I think is my daughter is much more like I don't know. That's a good question. He will probably eat up Star Trek. She's I think I have to catch her in the right mood. But I think for her, you talk about representation and why it matters.
Hmm.
And for me, much like you, I was introduced to Star Trek through my mother. My mother,
Sure.
one of the things that I know how I know Star Trek is great is because what would happen for me is my mother would be sitting on Saturday afternoon watching Star Trek, and I would be headed like out of the house,
Hmm.
and I'd pass her and I'd stop and look, and I never made it out of the house,
Love it.
right?
That's beautiful. That's
Like, and
beautiful.
I would kind of annoy her because I was like, okay, wait, because you jump in.
Hmm.
There's no DVR, you can't pause, you can't
Hmm.
go back. So I got to get caught up. Like, okay, well, who's that?
Hmm.
Okay, well, why are they doing that? Okay, what happened? Like, and she's like, boy, if you don't just sit down and watch, like, like I'm messing it up for her.
Yeah.
But I think that that was my introduction,
Mhm.
but it was Jordy
Sure.
in the next generation that I was like, oh, this is different.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
he felt like me, not he's not the captain,
Mhm.
right? He
Sure, sure.
he's cool, but he's kind of awkward, right? Like that felt like, oh, and so I think for my daughter, what she hasn't been exposed to yet, my daughter is incredible.
Mhm.
She's a voracious reader, but what she's drawn to are stories with strong female leads,
Sure.
right? So you ask her, is she really into like Harry Potter? No, because it's a lot about Harry, right? Like she wants strong female leads. And so I think when we start getting into things like Voyager, when we get into Discovery, I think she might be more interested in kind of that might be, even though it's much later and it's not starting at the beginning,
Mhm.
that might be something that she's more interested in. So we'll see. I'll keep trying. All right.
Yeah.
Next question for you, Paul. Ooh, I got a bunch of them.
Okay.
Let's. I'll toss you a softball one.
Softball
What Star Trek series or movie is your favorite and why?
favorite. I think the best storytelling of Star Trek is Deep Space Nine. I
Okay.
think like it's my favorite, you know, by a large margin. Uh because in a way this is like the the fringe of utopia. You know, like where you're on an outpost on the edge of, you're not even in Federation space. You're this invited occupying force, and you're trying to like say, "Hey, we're the Federation. We're good. Hang out with us." Whereas people may be like, "Okay, maybe not." Uh, but what made me really like uh, Deep Space Nine was that it had a real war.
Hmm.
And what it did was it goes like, "Oh, here you have utopia. How much, you know, how much can you stay true to yourself with your survival at stake?" You know, especially in the later seasons between 5, 6, and 7. Like,
Hmm.
you know, like my favorite episode is like Pale Moonlight, and where this is where Cisco basically tricks the Romulans into joining the war. Millions of Romulans die because of Cisco, by the way. Like he talk about war crimes. uh, but
Wow.
like, but like, you know, in that way, like you could see he's going like, oh, in order to save paradise, I have to be a little bit of a demon, and it's, but you know, but he doesn't like, what's the word I want to use? He doesn't feel nefarious. Like everything is done with like this consideration. You know, like I really like that kind of morality play with, you know, still the optimism. You know, I think that's really interesting. Like I've always drawn to Star Trek because of that. Like, you know, like Voyager is a very similar thing where it goes, okay, we're on our own. Can we be ourselves and not die? You know, and then there
Hmm.
was an episode of Voyager, like two-parter, like the Equinox, where there was another crew that was brought over, and they basically kept on breaking the Prime Directive, doing everything they could to get back, and it was just a real interesting juxtaposition. As far as movies, like I I would say Wrath of Khan. I think that's a very easy
It's an
thing to
easy
pick.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what I really like about Khan was that it drew from its the original series, as far as, you know, here is like there are ramifications for Kirk being Kirk, you know.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is when you think about Star Trek the motion picture, that
Mhm.
was a long TV episode,
Yeah,
right?
and
It was new, it was a continuation, but it was just a long episode. Whereas
and I also
Khan and I guess I would say you didn't really have to watch the series to see the
exactly.
motion picture,
Hmm. And
right?
I think like the people who did the motion picture for all of it didn't really understand what made Star Trek Star Trek.
Hmm.
You know, I
Okay,
think
well
like
what makes Star Trek Star Trek?
I think, you know, there is that, like I feel like uh a lot of sci-fi tends to be cold. You know, I think, you know, you think of a lot of movies that deal with science fiction, not science fantasy, but science
Mhm.
fiction. You know, because like here's people in the future in space, and space tends to be very a hard place to shoot, and you know, blah 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 blah. But with Star Trek, ultimately there is this heart about it that I think really comes through. Like, and it doesn't need to be like, "Oh, I love everyone," but, like, there's a personalness about it. Like, you know, for all of it, like, if you watch the original series and Next Gen, it's just like a an hour-long sitcom.
Mhm.
It's like a soap, right? Like if you even watch Next Generation, like the end music of like episodes it feels very
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a little quip between Bones and Spock, and
Mhm.
and like it's all very somewhat cheesy, tongue in cheek kind of thing in a way, and I think the universe of Star Trek and how it's presented in most of its forms really have that kind of like soul hugging kind of quality to it. Like like I use Battlestar Galactica as a counterpoint. Like Battlestar Galactica makes you feel spent. Like makes you feel like, oh wow, we did it. Oh my god. Oh whew. Like that. Like I can't believe we. Oh my god, Dom almost killed. The the chief or blah. It's
Mhm.
just all very.
Well,
You go.
there's a lot of movement, right? There's a lot of like when I don't want to use the word action, but there's a lot of motion,
Hmm.
right? Like if you think about Battlestar Galactica, you got the countdown clock and you got the sign lines coming. Like it is constantly everybody's moving.
Hmm.
Where when you think about Star Trek, it's slow, right? It's
It's
really about
talky.
it's talky.
Yeah.
There's a lot of walking, there's a lot of talking,
Mhm.
there's a lot of discussion, and it's super character driven,
Like,
right?
and another thing that, like, I remember during the release of Next Gen, and I think Next Gen really changed what Star Trek was in a really like an evolved kind of way. Like the writers were saying, and ultimately every episode is a commentary or a moral about what it is to be human or people and stuff like that. And so ultimately, like even with great advances in technology or blah blah blah, they're really reaffirming what goodness is. Does that make sense? So
Mhm.
in that goodness is like that optimism that I talk about, like
Yeah.
and I think it's just a really positive show generally.
Okay. All right. We're gonna get to more questions with Paul, but before we do that, we're gonna ask Paul a few trivia questions.
Trivia. Oh, I'm
Yes.
gonna.
All right. So, Paul, this first section is really about I'm going to give you a quote and give you a hint if you need it.
Huh?
But I give you a quote and I want you to see if you can tell me the series,
Oh wow.
if you can give me the episode and who the episode is bonus, but
All
I'm
right.
looking for the series, the character who said it, and for bonus points you can get if you know the episode, okay?
They're like a lot of episodes of Star Trek.
There's a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
So here we go. First
Yep.
quote. Survival is insufficient.
Survival. Survival is insufficient. I don't know, man. Is that Voyager?
It is Voyager.
Is that Seven of Nine?
It is 7 of 9.
Uh, like yeah, I don't know which episode.
That's okay. It's season 6, episode 2, Survival Instinct.
Okay, okay.
All right. We'll do a couple more and then we'll get
No,
back.
no, no, no,
I've
no,
got a
no, no, no.
whole
No.
bunch.
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
a whole
go
bunch.
for it.
All right. Next quote.
Yep.
Time is the fire in which we burn.
Uh, like I believe that is in Generations. I think that is Sauron or whatever his name was. Uh,
Soren, yes.
sorry, and like I think it was in 10 Forward talking to Picard. And because like who the hell says that?
Yes. When I read it, you can almost hear him saying it because he's the only person who would say it,
Like
right?
who the hell said, like that's a weird thing to say when you're having a drink with someone.
It is. All right, I'll give you one more. Here's
Yep, yep.
like I said, I got a bunch of these, but
Yeah.
here's a quote. Logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end.
Uh, I believe that is Spock speaking in Star Trek 6 when he's talking to uh, Samantha from Sex and the City.
Close. This was actually Star Trek The Next Generation season 5, episode 7, but it was Unification, but it was spoken by Spock.
Well, actually, if you go back to Star Trek 6, which predicated unification, that's where he first said it.
That's where he first said it. Okay, all right, nice. All right, let's get back into some questions. I got a whole bunch. I got quotes.
Okay, okay.
I've got
We can play this game.
scene description. I've
We,
got
we can
I
play this
got
game. It's fine.
characters.
It's fine.
I got some stuff. Okay, all right. Next
I'm no
question.
Boimler.
But you're pretty good. You are
Yeah.
pretty good. All right. Let's see. So, we talk a little bit about you said things like optimism, you talk about kind of influences. How has your perspective on Star Trek changed over the years, right? We've got like a lot, like you've grown up with Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Trek has evolved, the world has changed. How has your perspective on Trek changed and evolved over the years?
Like, I really like. It's interesting how, how should I say in the best way? Like Trek, when Trek survives, it survives because it kind of either leads or speaks to the the decade that it's in.
Okay.
For example, like when the original series came out, like it's in the 70s, right? I think if I'm mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, like the idea is like, hey, uh we're we're the good guys, and and we're gonna leave everyone alone until we can't, and then we're gonna help out. Like there is that sense of like, I don't want to say like benevolent imperialism, but but the idea of like, oh, the good guys have to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and so I really appreciated that as a foundational perspective, like in the 90s when Next Gen and all the through Voyager, no, yeah, I don't know if Enterprise did this as well, but through Voyager, like there was this sense of like, what is it to be a person, a good human, a good society, all these kind of
Mm-hmm.
like philosophical questions that were at the core of all the not all the episodes, but like a lot of the episodes. And so the like questions about being, like existence in some ways, like I remember one episode where I thought was really interesting. It wasn't one of my favorite episodes, but it's a Voyager episode where Cass gets like nearly killed in a cave, and Janeway has to uh basically go through some trials, and then but maybe not. And it's also basically a metaphor for faith. Like, like, hey, just because you don't know or understand, um, doesn't mean that it isn't, a thing. So, and I think that's very interesting for a sci-fi show to talk about faith in that way, you know. And there are a whole bunch of other stuff like in the early aughts. Is that right? That's when Abrams
Mm-hmm.
came out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there is a sexifying of things, like like
Yeah.
like Star Trek, need not be in the realm of like s- sound state studios and stuff like that. Like, you can have the camera move, you can have, some really cinematic technique. And so it seemed like,
Like a young James Kirk driving a car off a cliff and
yeah, and I think that was a time where you tried to make Star Trek hip. And that was also
uh-huh.
very interesting. Like, like there was a lot of like, I remember in that era, you know, the world was like, oh, let's reinvent the stuff that we like. Oh, look, here's Starsky and Hutch or 21 Jump Street as a movie, and
The
just
A-Team and all that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
all that stuff, to try to retell it in our own way. And like this current era, like I feel like there's like ultimately there is a sharing of power. Like it used to be in growing up, like the perspective was one person was going to save the day. It was going to be Captain Kirk. You follow him and he saves the day. And as the world gets bigger and more complicated, there's more of a sense of team. Like, that's why I feel like the Fast and Furious franchise does so well, because like it's a bunch of people who are doing things. And yes, Vin Diesel is the leader, but he doesn't he's not like Kirk,
He can't do it without
all
every single part of this, what ultimately is an incredibly diverse band of misfits. Yes.
that actually contribute to the decisions.
Hmm.
And so like if you watch like Strange New Worlds now, like there are only so many episodes about Pike, you know,
Hmm.
and he's effectively the lead. Whereas like if you were to look at TOS, like there was like one or two episodes about Spock, one or two episodes about McCoy, and one or two episodes about Scotty. There are no episodes about Sulu or Uhura or anyone else.
Isn't there an episode about Sulu where he like basically is high and walking around with a sword and no shirt on?
That he is high and he's walking around with no with a sword, but that's like the person who
It's
saved
not
the day.
backstory. Yeah, that's not.
And I'm not even criticizing it. I'm
Mhm,
saying like once upon a time there was the hero person, and now there is the hero us. And so
mhm.
like it's a very interesting like egalitarian place that we're in right now. Like there have been more episodes about Laan than like you know
And for this, I am thankful.
yeah. I mean like she had a whole time travel episode with no Pike, and like
And
it
a
kind
dry hot dog.
yeah, welcome to Hot Dog
A
Talk,
hot dog
everyone.
chat. Yes.
That's right. So yeah, so
You
like
think we talk about? You think we talk about peanut hamper? We talk about hot dogs more than we talk about peanut hamper.
yeah, and so I think what it is that like you watch Star Trek survive. Like it's just like hope and optimism. Like it always survives. It just reinvents itself in a different way. And I think,
So,
yeah, you go.
why do you think we had such a big gap with no Trek?
I think first and foremost, I think how should I say in the best way? I think after the second J.J. Abrams movie, I think people go like, "Oh, was that a fluke? The first Star Trek, Abrams Star Trek." I think it was fun, but I don't know if people love the second one, and I don't know if people love the third one. And so I think for all of it, they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to make it. What you call it? What's the word I want to use? Like they didn't know if the audience wanted that. But like when Paramount went and decided, you know what, we are going to launch Paramount Plus. Who do we know that will come to watch this? Who will pay to watch this? And it comes down to Trekkies, right?
Yeah.
Or Trekkers. Like I'm a Trekkie person. Like Trekker doesn't sound right.
No, I'm a Trekkie.
Yeah, and so like I remember once upon a time in Hollywood, it used to be like, oh, if you wanted to save money you wanted a movie that was going to make its money, invest in a Star Trek movie. That didn't work when Tom Hardy uh joined in nine, but like I'm not blaming Tom Hardy. I'm just saying that
Sounds like you're blaming Tom Hardy.
well, I was like uh but like so I think it was fairly a safe choice for Paramount to go like, oh, let's make a Star Trek that these people will have a base audience that will come and pay to see this. So I just think that they didn't like between darkness into darkness uh and
Discovery.
discovery. I just think they didn't really know. And when you say don't really know, like we're talking about like, oh, here's 2 years where we don't know what to do with it, and then like, oh, we're gonna do this, and then it's gonna take another X years to develop. So like there was a gap of a few years where they didn't know how to proceed.
Okay. All right. One more question, then we'll get to some more trivia.
Okay.
Paul, do you have a favorite Star Trek character? And if so, what makes them stand out? And I'm talking the entire catalog.
Sure. I think the easy things to say are Data or Spock,
Okay.
but if I really think about who my favorite character is, it's Nog, and that's not a joke. That's
Why? I gotta hear this. I want to know why.
because Nog has the biggest arc in the show, in all the shows. Like he
Okay.
starts off as like not to be racist, this conniving little Ferengi kid, and then like he goes like in real life, like this is like so like Star Trek, so Federation. Like he sees Cisco, and through the Federation's presence on Deep Space Nine, he goes like, "Oh, this is what I want to be because my culture, I'm never going to be anything. All I have is my tenacity in my hands. I don't have the lobes to make latinum." And so in that way, like he, I mean, it's effectively the American immigrant story where he goes like, "Oh, I'm gonna come to America so because my culture I can't hold my dreams." And he goes from like Ferengi kid to cadet to war hero. Like I mean, and eventually he becomes like a captain. So I mean, like he's the first Ferengi in Starfleet. I mean, it's like it sounds like I'm joking, but like he really is the embodiment of like what the Federation stands for. I mean, does
Hmm.
that sound weird? Like I mean,
No, I mean it doesn't. I mean,
like,
he is, especially when you think about where he ultimately ends up
mhm.
in, what is it, lower decks?
Does he? Do we see where's he end up in lower decks? I forgot.
He basically is like running, he's the Nagus, right? Like
Oh, no, that's
oh no,
Rom.
that's not Nog. That's Rom.
Yeah,
That's Rom.
Rom has a good arc too, but like he
Yes,
marries well.
he does. He
But
does.
that's his dad. But like but Nog,
Yeah.
like Nog he's really like my favorite. And I think in some ways he has like one of my favorite acting moments in all Star Trek, in an episode
Mm,
called Heart of Stone. So basically,
mm,
this is where he
mhm.
asks Cisco to sponsor him to go into Starfleet, and like when eventually Cisco goes like, "Here's your money back. I don't need to be tricked by you." He goes, "It's not a trick," and then and Cisco just badgers him and says like, "So why do you want to do this? You got to tell me why." And he explains why, and it is like beautiful and tear jerking, and and it's so true. It's like they really like. I feel really. I was like when Michael Jackson died, I was like, okay. And I think a lot of people like really when Prince died, okay.
Mhm.
When George Michael died, I was like, oh, that's sad. But when when the actor who played Nog died, I don't know why. Like I was like, oh, that's really. I was a little. I wouldn't say devastated, but I was like, oh, that's a real sad thing because he did. I feel like he did a really good job.
Aaron Eisenberg.
Yeah, that's there we go.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. I mean, I think one of the other interesting things about kind of Nog as a character is he's done something that is, I think we want to think of it as very American,
Yeah.
but it's also very heroic.
Mhm.
Is that
100%.
he pursued a noble profession against the wishes of his family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like an incredibly no, it's like not only did he pursue his passion, but his passion was noble, joining Starfleet, and it's the exact thing that no one in his family wanted for him.
Yeah, no, like he it cost him a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, it cost him a lot in order to do what he wanted to do. And Kyung's absolutely right. Like he was great in Paper Moon, by the way. Like I
Mhm.
I, I love that episode. I watch it. I mean, like anytime I'm depressed, like I always find myself in season, in either
That is a
season
great episode.
like 5, 6, or 7 of of Deep Space Nine, and like invariably I have a Nog episode in there.
Okay. All right. Let's do a couple more. Let's do some
Okay.
trivia questions. All right. Let's see. Do you want to do quotes? Do you want to do scene descriptions or character descriptions?
Well, we already did quotes. Let's do dealer's choice. You pick.
All right, let's go with scene descriptions. All right, I'm going to
Okay.
read you a description of a scene.
Mhm.
See if you can tell me what series, what show it came from, and who was in the scene. Okay.
Okay. Wow. That's okay. Sure,
I'm
sure.
not even asking you episode. I'm just
Okay,
asking you
great, great,
what
great, great,
series and who was in the scene.
great, great.
A starship captain faces
It's
off
Star Trek.
against his alter ego from an alternate universe in a tense and dramatic confrontation.
A Star Trek captain
Mm-hmm.
faces his alter ego in from an alternate dimension,
Mm-hmm. Alternate universe
alternate
in a
universe.
tense and dramatic confrontation.
Huh. I mean, I feel like it's Kirk versus Kirk when like, actually no, that's not right. That's he was split in half.
No, that's
Alternate,
it. That's
but
it. Lean into it.
he didn't. That was an alternate dimension.
I mean,
He-
wasn't that Mirror Kirk?
no, like that one, like Kirk, the transporter split Kirk into good Kirk and bad Kirk, and
I'm talking from Mirror.
mirror like they switch spots, right? So
I thought there was a confrontation between them kind of at the end.
no,
Okay.
okay, but
All right.
okay.
All right. Well, how about this one?
Okay, great.
This is this. Okay, I'll go. I like this one. Okay.
Yeah, great. Love it.
A Borg drone
Mhm.
experiences individuality for the first time thanks to a malfunctioning neurotransceiver.
So a Borg drone.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's the one that you're referring to is a Star Trek Next Generation with Hugh, where
Yes.
he's severed from the collective, and Jodie and Data find him, and hilarity ensues.
Yes. Well, it's one of my favorites because
Oh,
Hugh
sure.
becomes a character
Yeah.
who I always wonder
Mhm.
when they originally wrote that script, did they
Sure.
think that they were going to get as much run out of Hugh as they ultimately got?
Yeah, I do not know. Like I think Hugh was a great character. Like
Yeah.
I think Picard did him dirty, and
To me, there was no reason to kill him. There was absolutely no reason to kill him. That felt just wasteful. That just
yeah,
felt absolutely wasteful.
like yeah, no, it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. A young Starfleet officer undergoes a dangerous ritual to prove his worthiness as a warrior in a holographic simulation.
Star Trek officer.
Mm-hmm. A
Uh,
young Starfleet officer.
a young Starfleet officer. Uh, say that again.
A young Starfleet officer undergoes a dangerous ritual to prove his worthiness as a warrior in a holographic simulation.
Dangerous ritual. Like, trying to think. There's a few things that it could be.
Okay.
Like like my first thought is Ascension Day. Is that what it is? Where Worf like goes and gets hit by pain sticks.
That's a good one, but no.
So because worthiness of So holodeck, dangerous. I don't think I have this one.
I've got it as Star Trek Deep Space Nine,
Uh-huh.
Season 7, Episode 1, Image in the Sand
Uh-huh.
with Ensign Nog.
Nog goes. So image in the sand.
Mhm.
He goes. What? Like, because I'm familiar with it. This is where Cisco's on Earth. Kira is dealing with Romulans.
Mhm.
And what does Nog do? What's the simulation?
I had to look this one up.
No, it's
I'm trying to remember. Um, yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I have this one as he was in a simulation, but I'm trying to kind of look it up. Now I can't remember. So you picked one that Deep Space Nine. I need to go back and rewatch.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to think. Like, so where is Image in the Sand? Yes.
Uh-huh.
So is that where I think they are? They're trying to find. They eventually try to find the prophet that's going to bring back the wormhole.
Uh-huh.
Cisco, like Kira and Odo are dealing with the Romulans who won't back down. And where is Jake? And where is Nog? Holodeck.
So so Jake is on Earth.
Yeah, Jake is with his dad.
Yep. Nog is on the Defiant. So the Defiant returns to the station from convoy duty. When Nog basically comments he'd rather be on convoy duty than in battle where it's safer. But yeah, I thought I have to come back to that.
Okay. Let's do one more because like I feel like
one more. Gotta do one more. All right, let's see. Let's pick a good one.
Maybe what you did was you just chat GPT'd it and chat GPT just made it up.
Or someone else did, yes. Okay. This should be an easy one. It's an easy one for me.
Okay.
A crew member, I'm not telling you what their rank is, experiences an entire lifetime in the span of a few minutes after being struck by an alien probe.
Like a few minutes is, I think deceptive. It was probably a little more like 10, and it was Picard.
Yes.
It's where he learns to play a flute.
Yes.
But it's a very beautiful episode.
It is a beautiful episode.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. Like, for all this is a Picard centered episode. Everyone was just standing around watching Picard lay on the ground. But it's a very, very beautiful episode. I very much enjoy it.
Okay. All right. Couple more. We're getting close to the hour, so I'm gonna ask you two more tricky questions.
Anyone on the chat, please ask me any. Like, I know I'm dull, but you can ask me anything.
Okay. Here we go.
Here we go.
How do you think Star Trek has handled social and political issues over the years? If you had to grade Star Trek, what would you give it as a grade? What are your thoughts on how they've kind of handled social and political issues?
It's hard to say in the sense that not all series have done the same thing at the same level, right?
Okay.
That said, like, and also you have to balance consumability. So when I think of like TOS, I mean, like the idea of having like Uhura, and Sulu as main characters, and a Russian,
Hmm.
It's really forward thinking.
I mean, you have the
In a way.
first interracial couple kiss on
Yeah, yeah,
television.
and and to be fair, it was Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball that greenlit it.
Hmm.
And so, and they were an interracial couple, so I imagine there was some uh impulse for that. I think so. I think that's a like an A minus in that way. If I had to grade, like I don't expect TV shows to change the world immediately. I think it influences the world. Uh, I think next gen, I- as a whole, it's always pushing. Like next gen dealt with trans, like well, maybe not trans, non-binary,
Okay.
with the episode with Riker. Like,
Hmm.
and I thought that was like really forward thinking in retrospect is like really forward thinking. Like, uh, although like I would say in that episode, it's very, gender centric. So like maybe that's not the best episode, but the fact that it was even in discussion is something interesting. And D Space Nine had like first lesbian kiss or woman kiss with Dax and her wife.
Hmm.
So I think I think it's always pushing. Like I think what it does very well is goes, hey, like the social norms are not the end all of what we like. It's not the end. We haven't achieved equality and representation. Like at sometimes I feel like society gets to the point where they go, oh, we solved it. We solved racism. Like, Obama got elected, so racism is solved. And I get it. I get why people would think that, but I feel like Star Trek always pushes a little bit. Like, in Strange New World, like Captain Angel. Oh my god.
Hmm.
Like, uh such a great character, such a great uh, you know, just a seamless use of it. Like, didn't make a big deal of it, and
Yeah.
yet it was a big deal. It was just beautiful.
Or Discovery with Adira and Gray,
Mhm.
like that entire dynamic. I think, I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and one of the things that they noted is that there's a lot of movie and TV shows that have aged terribly
Mhm.
over the last 40 years or so, right? One of them being Revenge of the Nerds,
Sure, sure.
right? For whatever it was when we were all adolescents, not supposed about watching it and watching it. You look back on it to now and it's like, oh my goodness, that's terrible.
But why? Like don't misunderstand me. I'm not that guy. But I go like in the context of what society accepted, it it wasn't terrible. And as society evolves, like we look back and go like, oh, the person who I was enjoyed that. I'm no longer that person.
Yeah, I think when I think about something like Revenge of the Nerds, I look and go, even at the time,
Uh-huh.
there should have been an adult in the room that said, "This is not good," right? Like what we're depicting here is not great. I bring that up to
Uh-huh.
juxtapose that with Star Trek. Is that as I look back over Star Trek and go, I'm really proud of what Star Trek has been, because wherever society has been, Star Trek has pushed that. And so the result is, as you look back, even if you say, well, there were some very misogynist tendencies in TOS, it still pushed the envelope, and you
Yeah.
go, all right, like still wasn't as bad as it could have been, right?
Well, I mean, like I think a lot of people nowadays judge the past as to why it's not where we are now, what we value
Hmm.
now. but I think like you need to judge the past in the sense of like here is where we were, and here is the direction that this place was going. Like like for all of it, once upon a time, it was very common to have segregated schools.
Yes.
you know, and you know, like there were people who go like, "This is not great," and I think for all of it, they were right.
Hmm.
So are looked favorably, on on history that way. I can guarantee you that all their viewpoints were not like to the level of it now,
Sure.
right? But
Sure.
you can only judge it for the context that the direction that it was going.
Right.
You can't really go like the absolute, like, oh well, I can't believe you ate beef. Like 10 years from now, it could be like, oh look, you drove a gas guzzling car, and you how could you do that? You sacrificed my future, mom, dad, and you go like, I did the best I could. It goes,
Yeah.
and what about the air conditioning? So cold, so cold.
It's nice in here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
warm.
yeah.
Okay, so we've been going for almost an hour. Lots more questions I could ask. I'm
Mm,
going to ask you this one, Paul. What are
yeah.
your hopes for the future of the Star Trek franchise?
Well, my hope is that uh we get some funding to go on the Star Trek cruise. but like
I'm
but
working on my abs right now.
there we go. But like once again, like I believe that Star Trek exists and will always exist as long as it remembers that it's about hope and optimism. Like I don't want to be a broken record, I apologize. But I just feel like in this day and age we're kind of straying from that. It's so easy to look at the negatives, and it's not that we should avert our eyes from it, but like it shouldn't be that the negatives color like our future. It shouldn't be like, oh, because it's negative now, because things are bad now, that it can't be better. I think that I think Star Trek, as long as it continues to fight like a beacon in the ocean of hopelessness that some people might have. Like, I think that idea of like, oh, there is a path forward. We just have to believe in the goodness of ourselves, and be better. Like, all the time you look at Star Trek, like you look at Federation values, people want to do some other things. They go like, I would rather just, fire. I just would rather just, just interfere or
Hmm.
blah, 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 blah. They are restrained from doing that because they can postpone their initial desire to do good, bad, or whatever for the greater good of like, this is going to be better for everyone if I do this correctly. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, I agree with you. I think for me, I'm really hoping that any future Star Trek does what some of the things that we talked about,
Mm.
and that is it's this place where we can look to and say, I want my future to look like that.
That's beautiful, Glide. I think that's what it's. You know, at its heart, I think Star Trek should stay aspirational. Like
Agreed.
this is what we should be. We should strive to be this. And I think, a lot of shows don't do that. Like, like I remember like I was watching Shonda Rhimes talk about Scandal, and she goes like, "Hey, you couldn't make Scandal with when things were hopeless. Like you only can make Scandal when things are pretty good because it's a fairly negative show, and I think like nowadays with and this is social media and the negativity that can be, I wish people would watch more things that was aspiring. I wish people would watch more things that would go like, oh, humans may suck, but they have the capacity to be better. I think Star Trek has always done that in a way that was palatable.
Yeah. I look, I think you're spot on. I think we've we've come to a place in TV culture
Mhm.
where there are more shows with an anti-hero,
Sure.
more shows where it's dark and we're almost enjoying the turmoil and the frustration and the pushing the rock uphill of the characters. And I think for me, that's why I was so drawn to a show like Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
because Ted Lasso wasn't without some conflict
Hmm.
and a little bit of strife, but it was so aspirational. You had this character who you were like, man, even though in their heart and their when they're going through hard things, that's the type of person I want in my life, right? Like you
Yeah.
look at that and you're like, I want to root for them. I do think we need more shows like that. And Choopy in the chat says, I think it's possible Academy is going to be an even better vehicle for this. It has the potential because it is about young people. I'm hopeful that what we get with Academy is that bright-eyed, bushy-tail, the best of the Federation, you know, we're smiling and like bright, which I think we get a little bit with Strange New World. I think it's one of the things I really love about Strange New World. And I'm hoping it's not a bunch of young people going on action adventures every week.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope so. Like ultimately, I think Star Trek needs to be in the hands of people who understand what Star Trek is. I think I think Star Trek is vast enough that it can hold a couple of missteps. But in the like you see it with Star Wars sometimes. Like there are a lot of things that people are not really digging with the new Star Wars, and I don't know if it's because they're being trolls or whatever. But in the end, the ultimate feeling for those people, like, it does not feel like Star Wars. And so,
Mhm,
like, I hope that, like, the people who understand, like, I think the greatest, I think if you repeated Next Generation in the 90s, Star Trek would have died. I think knowing how to evolve it from TOS to next gen is
mhm.
was the key to keeping it alive.
Oh, wait, you said next gen. So you said if you repeated TOS in the 90s, it would have
Yeah,
died?
yeah.
Yeah,
I think if you just did, I think there was the need to grow, and they did it beautifully.
I agree with you, but I'd also say if you repeated TOS
Mhm.
in, what
Today.
was it, 2018,
Mhm.
2017, I think if you repeated you if you had started off there, I don't know they would have caught on. I think it
Yeah,
would have been great for those of us who love TNG.
yeah, yeah.
I think you needed a Discovery, which is
Mhm.
shot darker, which has more angst, to get to A Strange New Worlds, which is shot lighter and has more, happier storylines.
Maybe. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I don't I don't disagree. I don't push against that. I mean, in the end, like, we're talking about a show that inspires,
mhm,
and as long as people remember that they need to do that with this show, I think it'll be fine. Like I'm excited to see where it can go. Like what I worry about is ultimately going, oh, here is this IP, let's just milk it.
yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. So I mean, like uh, like I said, I like there are times when I watch Star Trek episodes, in this, in this iteration where I go like, oh, I don't know if this person is a fan of Star Trek or even understands Star Trek. I think they might understand story, but
Mm,
this episode may not does not feel like Star Trek. But that's just me. Like am I a hater?
yeah.
Obviously, I'm a chaos agent. Of course, I'm I'm terrible. Like no one should listen to me.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got a chance to listen to you, Paul. And if
Uh,
you're still listening, thank you so much for joining us on the pod
mhm.
this week. We will be back with our captain, Myrriah Gossett,
And
next week, I believe. Is that right, Paul? We're coming back
I,
next week?
I'm hoping so. Like if I'm not in the brig, which
Yeah.
is a
If
possibility.
if she has not pushed me out an airlock and
That's
told
right.
me not to come back,
That's right. It goes
I
like,
will.
oh,
I will be back.
that's right. We are on computer. The computer is flying the ship right now.
Yes. But assuming that we'll be back talking more Star Trek as we get ready to talk Prodigy. So if I mean it's coming. So please come back with us. And you can always subscribe, rate, review us on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast. Check us out at StarTrekPod.co. If you want to hang out and talk all things Trek, come hang out with us on our Patreon, patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. And thanks, Karen, for helping us out on X.
Yeah.
For still there.
If you guys have any thoughts of how we can make our podcast better,
yes,
feel free to let us know. Say, hey, more Myrriah. Great.
less Clyde. I'll
That's
listen.
right.
I like the feedback.
That's right. So, Paul, get a haircut.
I was gonna say, Clyde, shave your beard. Like all those, whatever you got.
It could be. Be sure, to let us know.
Yeah, look, we love the community. I think we have one of the best Star Trek communities around. I say this all the time. I have gone through a dark season during the pod, and it's our podcast community that kept me tethered and sane. So I will always be grateful and thankful for that. So yeah, I love our community, but if you've got ideas on how to make things better and brighter, new things that we can try, send them on over. We're all ears. All right. So thank you for joining us on Star Trek Discovery Pod. Yes.
Live long and prosper. That's what
Myrriah says.
Yeah. Bye. Come on, Clyde. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. There. Okay. Well.
Yeah, that's all I got. I can't.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.